Good afternoon. During today's Oversight hearing titled Voting Matters in Native Communities, we will examine the American Indian and Alaska Native voter experience, including ongoing challenges to exercising the right to vote in Indian country. We will also examine the less formally documented Native Hawaiian voter experience for the first time in this committee's history. The legacy of Native American voter suppression is a stain on our country's democracy. Even after gaining citizenship in 1924, American Indians and Alaska Natives did not have full access to the ballot box. In fact, it wasn't until 1962, that all guaranteed voting rights for Native Americans. The 1965 Voting Rights Act strengthened these rights, and the 1975 amendment to the Act included further protections for language assistance and translation of voting materials. And yet, 50 years later, Native Americans continue to experience voter discrimination and unjust behavior at the ballot box. In his testimony before the Judiciary Committee hearing on Native voting rights last week, which I'll enter into the record, Navajo Nation President Nez described barriers like the elimination of in-person polling locations on the reservation, distant voter registration sites, all-mail voting systems, lack of language assistance for Navajo-only speakers, and racial gerrymandering. Unfortunately, Navajo's case is not unique in Indian country. Native voters in states across the country continue to be disproportionately affected by these types of voter suppression efforts. That simply cannot stand. Congress must take action to counterbalance this historical and ongoing discrimination. We cannot allow our most fundamental right, the right to vote, to be stripped from Native Americans. Last week, the Senate had the opportunity to take action by passing the Freedom to Vote Act, which contains key reforms in the Native American Voting Rights Act of 2021, but that bill was blocked. We in Congress must stay vigilant and keep up the fight to protect the franchise, especially for communities of color. And as members of the Indian Affairs, particular duty to American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians to ensure that their votes are counted, not discounted, because voting is sacred and Native votes matter. Before I turn to the Vice Chair, I'd like to welcome and extend my aloha to Mr. Na'alehu Anthony and thank our witnesses for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing the unique perspectives that each of you bring to this conversation.